Imagine an elevator like shooting straight up the shaft of this gleaming new skyscraper, just rocketing toward a luxury penthouse.
Right.
And this elevator is powered by an over 8% GDP growth rate, a booming stock market, massive foreign investment. It just feels unstoppable.
Oh, absolutely. On paper, it looks incredible.
But here's the catch. 90% of the people in this building aren't actually in that penthouse elevator. They are crammed into a service elevator stuck down in the basement, and, the cables are kind of fraying.
Yeah, that is a perfectly grim analogy.
Right. So today, we are forcing the doors open on the great Indian economic paradox. We've got a macroeconomy that dazzles the world, yet ranks 134th out of 193 countries on the Human Development Index.
The juxtaposition is it's stark.
Yeah.
And it really forces us to reconsider what economic growth actually means on the ground.
Exactly. Have you ever wondered why economic booms don't always feel like booms for everyone? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into a huge stack of economic policy documents, government committee reports, and Indian Economic Service analytical frameworks to figure that out.
And for anyone listening who is, say, deep into revision for the IES General Economics Paper 4, this is your core material. We are talking poverty, unemployment, and human development in India.
Yeah, we're decoding how measuring human deprivation is just fiercely controversial, how the labor market actually functions, and how human development programs try to catch the people falling through the cracks.
So the best place to start dismantling this whole paradox is at the foundation. Before any state mechanism can fix poverty, they have to define it. They have to draw a mathematical line in the sand.
Right, because moving that line by just a few rupees changes the destiny of millions of people.
Literally millions. And historically, India used a very rigid, calorie-based approach. It was all about physiological survival.
Like, how much food do you physically need to not die?
Basically, yeah. The old Planning Commission said if you live in an urban area, you need 2,100 calories a day. Rural areas needed 2,400 because of, manual labor. They converted those calories into a monetary figure, and boom, that was the poverty line.
Wait, but giving a family just enough money to buy 2,400 calories of grain, that doesn't make them not poor. That just makes them not starving.
Precisely. It assumed the state would provide everything else: health, education, shelter for free, which obviously wasn't happening.
Right, those are two entirely different states of existence.
Which is why the methodology had to evolve. And that leads us to the Tendulkar Committee in 2009. This was a major paradigm shift because they shifted to a consumption basket approach.
Okay, so more than just food.
Yeah, they included private expenditures on health and education for the first time.
A consumption basket sounds great, but when you look at the actual numbers they published for 2011 to 2012, the controversy makes total sense. They set the line staggeringly low.
Very low.
For urban areas, it was 33 rupees a day. And for rural, it was 27 rupees a day. Based on that 33 rupee threshold, they claimed a national poverty rate of 21.9%.
And the backlash was massive. 33 rupees in a city like Mumbai or Delhi. That barely covers a bus ticket, let alone food, healthcare, and clothing.
It's like trying to measure the depth of a pool while using a 6-inch ruler. Of course, it looks shallow. So the public outcry forced the government to set up the Rangarajan committee, right?
Right, in 2014. And Rangarajan tried to find a middle ground. They restored some nutritional requirements, proteins and fats, not just calories, and they widened the non-food basket.
And what did that do to the numbers?
Well, the urban line went up to 47 rupees a day, and the rural line went to 32 rupees.
Okay, so just 14 rupees more a day for the urban line. But the macroeconomic impact of that tiny bump is insane. Under Rangarajan, the poverty rate jumped to 29.5%.
Yeah, that tiny adjustment reclassified roughly 93 million people. 93 million human beings were suddenly recognized as poor just because the statistical parameters shifted.
Which exposes a massive flaw in how we measure this. It's so binary. You're either above the line or below it. And politicians obsess over this, the head count ratio.
Oh, the head count ratio, or what economists call H. It's the most widely cited number, but it is deeply flawed.
Because if you think about it mathematically, it's completely gamifiable.
Gamifiable is the exact right word. And if you're tracking the IES exam topics, you absolutely need to understand the Foster-Greer-Thorbecke, or FGT, family of indices, which exposes this exact flaw.
Let's break that down. So the head count ratio is basically FGT 0, right?
Correct. FGT 0 just measures the proportion of people below the line. Now, imagine you're a policymaker with a limited budget. If your only goal is to lower that headcount ratio, where do you spend your money?
I'd spend it on the people situated just millimeters below the line. Like, if the line is 33 rupees and someone earns 31, I just give them 3 rupees. Boom, they cross the line, the stats look great, and I declare victory.
Exactly. And the person earning 5 rupees a day, the person in crushing absolute destitution, they get ignored because it costs too much to push them over the line. FGT0 is blind to the depth of poverty.
So how do we fix that?
With FGT1, the Poverty Gap Index. This measures the average shortfall of the poor as a fraction of the poverty line. It tells you exactly how much money, perfectly targeted, would lift everyone out.
But even that doesn't capture inequality among the poor themselves, does it?
No, it doesn't. Which brings us to the Squared Poverty Gap, or FGT2. This is the most critical metric for advanced policy.
Why squared?
Because by squaring the poverty gap, the formula heavily weights the absolute worst-off individuals. If you give a small transfer to the absolute poorest person, FGT2 improves drastically. It builds an aversion to inequality directly into the math. It targets the worst off.
That makes so much sense for policy, but, politicians don't campaign on the Squared Poverty Gap Index. They just say, we lifted 50 million people out of poverty.
True. But the policy apparatus knows the flaws. That's why they tried things like the SECC, the Socioeconomic Caste Census, which looked at actual lived deprivations, like, do you have a kucha house, or are you a landless laborer instead of just an income line?
Right. But if we're talking about comprehensive deprivation, we have to talk about the Alkire-Foster method. This was a big focus in the recent IES exams, comparing income poverty to multidimensional poverty.
Yes, the Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI. Alkire-Foster fundamentally reshaped development economics. It rejects the idea that poverty is just a lack of money.
Because poverty is an experience of multiple overlapping deprivations.
Exactly. The MPI operates across 3 core dimensions: health, education, and living standards.
And it breaks those down into 10 specific indicators, right? I want the listener to picture this because it translates abstract math into daily life. For health, it's nutrition and child mortality.
Yes, and education looks at years of schooling and school attendance.
And living standards looks at 6 things: cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets.
The brilliance here is the dual cutoff methodology. First, you have the indicator cutoff. Are you deprived in cooking fuel? Like, do you use wood or dung instead of LPG?
Right, but being deprived in just cooking fuel doesn't automatically make you multidimensionally poor.
Correct. That's the second cutoff, the poverty cutoff. The indicators are weighted. Health and education carry more weight. To be classified as multidimensionally poor, you must be deprived in indicators that add up to at least 1/3 or 33.3% of the total weight.
It captures how misery compounds. No clean water leads to sickness, which leads to missing school. The deprivations lock together.
And when you apply the UNDP Global MPI to India, it's a dual-sided story. On one hand, it's a historic triumph. Between 2005 and roughly 2020, India lifted an estimated 415 million people out of multidimensional poverty.
415 million. That's incredible. And it's largely because of targeted schemes, right? Swachh Bharat for toilets, Ujjwala for gas cylinders. When you give someone an LPG cylinder, you instantly eliminate an Alkire-Foster deprivation.
Yes, but, and this is a big, but the nutrition poverty link remains our Achilles heel. The anthropometric data for children is deeply alarming.
Right, stunting and wasting.
Stunting, where a child is too short for their age due to chronic undernutrition, is still hovering around 35%. And wasting, which is acute malnutrition, being too thin for your height, is near 19%.
Which is why they launched Pihor Amahan, the nutrition mission. Because fixing stunting isn't as simple as handing out a gas cylinder. It's intergenerational. It's tied to maternal health and early childhood care.
Exactly. If 1/3 of your future workforce is cognitively impaired due to childhood stunting, your 8% GDP growth is structurally unsustainable. Income lines completely mask this qualitative reality.
So, if escaping poverty means overcoming these overlapping deprivations, the main way a family does that is through the labor market. They need to work.
Absolutely.
But when we look at how employment is measured in India, the illusion really breaks down. Let's get into the unemployment statistics and the PLFS data.
The Periodic Labor Force Survey. Measuring unemployment in an economy where 90% of the workforce is informal is incredibly complex.
Right. It's not like the U.S. where you file for unemployment and show up on a spreadsheet. In India, we have this alphabet soup of metrics: UPS, USS, CWS, and CDS. Let's decode these for the
We'll
listeners.
start with the usual principal status, or UPS. The reference period is an entire year, 365 days. It relies on the major time criterion.
Yeah.
Did you spend the majority of the year engaged in economic activity? If yes, you're employed.
Okay, then there's the usual subsidiary status, the USS.
Right. This catches marginal workers. If you were unemployed under UPS, but you found work for at least 30 days during the year, the combined usual status sweeps you into the employed category.
And that creates a massive statistical illusion. The usual status unemployment rate looks super healthy, like 3 to 4%, but it's a mirage.
Oh, so?
If I'm a farm laborer and I get work for 40 days during the harvest, but spend the next 300 days idle and in debt, the usual status metric says, hey, you're employed. It totally masks precarious labor.
Which is exactly why economists prefer the current weekly status, or CWS.
Yeah.
This narrows the reference period down to just 7 days. Under CWS, if you worked for even 1 hour on any day during that week, you are employed.
Wait, 1 hour.
1 single hour.
So if I spend 6 days desperately looking for a job, and on Sunday I help a guy unload a truck for an hour for 50 rupees, CWS counts me as employed. That ignores my massive deficit of unutilized time.
Exactly. Which brings us to the most revealing metric, the current daily status, or CDS. CDS abandons the binary employed or not approach. It measures person days, it looks at each half day of the week and asks how many hours you actually worked.
And CDS always gives the highest unemployment rate, right? Often pushing 8% or more, because it captures underemployment.
Precisely. Underemployment is the defining crisis. The documents highlight different types. Open unemployment, where you're searching and finding nothing. Structural unemployment, which is a skill mismatch. Frictional, the lag between jobs. And the biggest one, disguised unemployment.
Disguised unemployment. This was a direct question in the 2024 exams. Let's look at agriculture. We have roughly 45% of the workforce in agriculture, half the country. But it only contributes like 15% to the GDP.
The asymmetry is devastating. Disguised unemployment is when more people are working than are technically necessary. Their marginal productivity is zero.
Like a family farm.
Exactly. Say a father and 2 sons work a 2-acre plot and yield 50 quintals of wheat. The sons get married, their wives join in, maybe some kids. Now 7 people work the land, but the yield, still 50 quintals.
So those extra people are officially employed on paper, but economically they produce nothing additional. You could pull 50 million people off farms tomorrow, put them in factories, and crop yields wouldn't drop by a single grain.
They are trapped in a holding pattern. And it's not just farms. We see this in urban areas with educated youth. It's invisible underemployment.
Like the guy with a master's degree delivering food for an app, he's technically employed under CDS, but his human capital is totally vaporized.
And this brings up a huge paradox regarding gender. The female labor force participation rate, the LFPR. India has a deeply concerning trend here, known as the female LFPR paradox.
Yeah, let's talk about this. Because in the 2000s, as GDP was booming, female participation actually plummeted. It dropped to like 23%. That defies normal economic logic, right? Usually, richer countries have more women working.
It's a combination of the income effect and a severe structural deficit. As household incomes rose, families experienced the income effect. They could finally afford to have women stop doing brutal, unpaid agricultural labor.
So they pulled out of the farms.
Right. And in a patriarchal society, having women stay home became a status symbol.
But why didn't they transition into office jobs or factories?
Because of the structural deficit. The economy wasn't creating safe, accessible, formal manufacturing jobs near their homes. It created high-end IT jobs for graduates or precarious construction work. So you get a U-shaped curve for female LFPR. It drops as incomes first rise and only goes back up when formal jobs become abundant.
Which we're still struggling to reach. Some recent PLFS data shows a slight uptick, but sadly, it's mostly women going back to self-employment in agriculture due to rural distress, not salary jobs.
And that leads into the skill development ecosystem. The government recognized this structural mismatch. They launched the PMKVY, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, and the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme, NAPS.
Train the youth for the jobs that exist.
That was the idea. But the outcomes have drawn heavy criticism. They certified millions of youths, but the actual placement rates, people who got and kept formal jobs, were cited as below 30% in many reports.
Because supply-side interventions can't fix a demand-side crisis. You can train a million plumbers and coders, but if the macroeconomy isn't building the factories or offices to absorb them, you just have highly trained, frustrated gig workers.
Exactly. Which means we have to look at how the state tries to build human capital directly when the labor market fails.
Right. So if informal jobs aren't providing security, the burden falls on social infrastructure. Let's pivot to human development and the HDI.
India ranks 134th on the HDI. The HDI is a geometric mean of 3 pillars: income, health, and education.
And a geometric mean is unforgiving.
Right.
If your education score is awful, it drags the whole average down. You can't just offset it with a high GNI per capita.
Precisely. Let's break down the health pillar. Life expectancy has improved to about 72 years. A lot of this is thanks to the National Health Mission, the NHM.
The ASA workers.
Yes, accredited social health activists. They revolutionized rural primary care. And schemes like the Janani Suraksha Yojana, which gives cash incentives for women to deliver babies in hospitals rather than at home.
That drove down the infant mortality rate and maternal mortality ratio massively.
It did. But the documents highlight a glaring vulnerability. Out-of-pocket expenditure. You survive infancy, but if someone gets cancer, private medical bills will instantly plunge your family below the poverty line. Health shocks cause massive downward economic mobility.
So the government launched Ayushman Bharat, specifically the PMJI component, to act as a safety net, right?
Yes, PMJAY is a massive state-funded health insurance scheme. It provides 5 lakh rupees of coverage per vulnerable family per year.
But there are critical design limitations. It covers secondary and tertiary hospitalization. But what about outpatient costs? The daily medicines, the routine diagnostics, the regular doctor visits?
PMJAY largely ignores outpatient care. And statistically, those routine out-of-pocket costs are what cumulatively bleed poor households dry. It's a major gap in the coverage.
Wow. Okay, let's look at the education pillar, the third part of the HDI. We passed the Right to Education Act, the RTE. That got gross enrollment in primary schools up to near universal levels. Millions of kids in seats.
But enrollment does not equal education. If you look at the ACER data, the Annual Status of Education Report, the learning outcomes crisis is terrifying.
Yeah, the ACER surveys show that a shocking percentage of grade 5 students in rural India can't even read a grade 2 level textbook or do basic 2-digit subtraction.
Let that sink in. 5th graders who can't read basic words. They are enrolled, they check the government box, but their human capital formation is practically zero.
Which is why the National Education Policy, NEP 2020, is trying to overhaul the system.
Yes, the NEP dismantles the old 10+2 system and introduces a 5+3+3+4 structure. But the crucial pivot is its aggressive focus on foundational literacy and numeracy.
Right, because if a kid can't read by grade 3, the rest of their schooling is basically a charade.
Exactly. The NEP also mandates the early integration of vocational training to try and fix that structural skill mismatch we talked about earlier.
Okay, so bringing all of this together, we've gone from FGT poverty indices to PLFS labor metrics, all the way to Ayushman Bharat and NEP. For the listener preparing for the exams, especially IES 2026, what are the most likely patterns they need to synthesize?
Based on the trends, I'd say there are 3 major areas to master. First, compare the methodologies and policy implications of Tendulkar versus Rangarajan versus the Alkire-Foster MPI. Understand why we move from consumption baskets to multidimensional deprivation.
Got it. What's the second?
The LFPR trends in India, specifically explaining the female LFPR paradox. You need to articulate the income effect versus the structural deficit in job creation.
And the third?
The design and coverage gaps in Ayushman Bharat. Understand the difference between tertiary hospitalization coverage and the neglect of out-of-pocket outpatient care.
That is incredibly comprehensive. High aggregate GDP growth is a fantastic engine, but without structural transformation, it stays in the penthouse elevator.
It won't translate to broad-based human development unless we move people out of disguised unemployment into high-productivity jobs.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. For 200 years, the playbook for developing nations was to build massive, labor-intensive manufacturing, put millions of farmers into factories like South Korea or China did. But with artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation threatening to wipe out those exact entry-level manufacturing and service jobs, can India even complete that classic structural transformation? Or is the latter being pulled up by technology, forcing us to invent a completely new economic playbook for the 21st century?
It's a huge question. The historical models are fracturing right in front of us.
Think about it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.